Your local station, 590 AM, 101.1 FM, WMBS. Real estate, even during the time of COVID, is always an interesting, good investment. A real estate career is a good idea. And joining us to talk about this is Sidney Potter, who is the author of The Broker, Deals, Steals, and Moving Forward. And Sidney Potter, thank you for joining us today.
Bill, man, thanks a lot. Appreciate your time.
Well, I seem to start every single interview this way, but COVID-19 has affected everything, including the real estate industry.
It has. Most recently, within the last week, Thursday, the 26th of August, the Supreme Court, which had a history in the last year and a half of extending the CDC order, which was the rent eviction moratorium, finally fell on its sword, more or less. It got called out by the Alabama Association of Realtors, who were the plaintiffs against the CDC order, and they contended that there was no need for the order because there was tens of billions of dollars in rent eviction relief money. But the unfortunate aspect is that only about a fourth that had been doled out to the respective tenants. So, unfortunately, you've got a lot of renters as a result of the plague that really have no option at this point in terms of staying in their apartments, essentially.
Is it a time to be thinking about selling your house, buying your house, moving on, or is it a time to stand pat?
It depends where you are. If you're there is something called MSA, Metropolitan Statistical Areas, about 370 of them, and depending which one you happen to be domiciled in, it may be a good time to stand pat or sell, or at least get a valuation on your property to determine whether or not it's a good idea to sell. The big cities have an incredible amount of appreciation. When I think of big cities in your wonderful states, such as Pittsburgh, which I've worked in, and also Philadelphia, right there on Market Street, Broad Street, it's a great time to sell. The valuations on those have stabilized at this point, but when you look at year-end, they're up probably anywhere from 15 to 25%, which is a substantial amount.
Now, obviously, this your need comes into play here too. If all of a sudden you've got a job in Houston and you got to sell your house, that pretty much takes care of it right there.
Right. Just take your life jacket with you. We're getting a lot of rain these days.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, maybe today is not a good day. We're seeing research that said that the pandemic has affected minority home buyers more, and has it also, by the way, had the same effect on renters and on landlords?
Well, the black and brown, once again, unfortunately, has had a disproportionate effect on the economic ills of the country. It's just the way it is. That lack of equity is pretty present in your 6 o'clock national news broadcast, or 6:30. You're finding that they are having more difficult time because of inequities to stay in place. That's on a pro-rata share basis. If you look at America as a whole, and those that are at the poverty level, it's actually Anglo-Saxon, white Americans that are in need of that rent relief as much as possible. But because they're in conservative states, it becomes less likely they'll get access to that need because of the income qualification in which to qualify for that relief. The second part of your question, Bill, wasn't rent eviction in terms of disproportionate effect, but you mentioned something else, and I'm sorry I forgot.
I was also saying, does it have an effect on minority landlords as well?
Oh, of course. Listen, landlords, and most of them, just like their small businesses, account for a substantial amount of employment in America. COVID has no race barrier to a certain extent, although black and brown have a higher proclivity because of medical issues, because of lack of health care. But the landlords are finding just a difficult time, either you're black, white, or any iteration in between. There has to be a little bit of empathy, I certainly would have as a real estate professional, towards the landlords, irrespective of race, because they have bills to pay as well. They're also in a very tight position because the money that is funneled towards the relief can either go to the landlord, depending upon the program, and or directly to the tenant. And the chickens are coming back home to roost in terms of the tenants having somewhat of a payback mentality towards landowners, because if they get the money, it doesn't necessarily mean they're compelled to pay them. They simply may leave the premises. So it's getting pretty ugly on there, and you have to have a degree of empathy for both the landlord and the tenant and see both sides of the argument.
Your local station, WMBS Real Estate, during the time of COVID-19. There's moves that you can make and ideas that you can use. The new book is called The Broker, Deals, Steals, and Moving Forward, and we're joined by D. Sidney Porter. Before we go any further, is there someplace we can go to for information about the state of the real estate market, and also about your book, The Broker, Deals, Steals, and Moving Forward? Is that available on the usual platforms?
Absolutely, all the online amateurs platforms, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, etc. I would say this, for those that are looking for rent relief, the three websites and our word searches that you want to conduct would be LSC, as in Legal Services Corp.gov. That has a litany state by state, including the District of Columbia, on places to go, non-charities, or rather charities and nonprofits, to get rent relief. The Treasury Department has something on its website called Emergency Rental Assistance Programs, similar to the LSC. And, of course, there's the National Low Income Housing Coalition, which is going to list 400-plus organizations where you can find rent relief. I mean, there are literally hundreds of different types of programs. There's 50 states here in the Union that one can go to where they'll find assistance, and hopefully it gets to them on time for the relief, not only the landlords, obviously, but the tenants as well.
Now, is this a good time to be thinking about switching gears career-wise and going into real estate, especially if you are a part of the minority community?
Yes and no. I look at the old adage, Bill, that where there is crisis, there is opportunity. It's not a tantamount to going into a building that's on fire, but you might want to look at it that way in terms of it being half full instead of half empty. Given that there's been so much displacement of Black Americans in this plague, great time to think about a career change. The barriers of entry to a real estate profession, on the sell side at least, are fairly low. It takes 3 to 4 months to take the required prerequisite education to get your real estate license. You should be able to get an assistant position with any real estate brokerage that will pay a meaningful amount of money and has more upside than, let's say, flipping burgers or doing something that's menial type of work, flipping burgers to stocking shelves at Home Depot, although that doesn't pay too bad these days. So the barriers of entry are pretty low. It's not like you're trying to finesse up your resume, gin your resume up and get a position on Wall Street as a hedge fund analyst. The upside is substantial. It's a great amount of freedom. Just a very quick side note, when I wrote The Broker, I looked into programs to help women and minorities, and there's a lot of great infrastructure towards females, which is wonderful. But you don't see that as much, let's say, for Black commercial real estate brokers or Hispanic, and it would be ideal to get in those type of positions because that is more money in a very pedestrian way to say it, but it creates generational wealth, which is what lacks substantially in the Black and brown communities. Right now, a Black household has about 1/10 of the wealth of a white household, which is about $170,000 compared to $17,000. Ideally, that gap will be shortened sooner than later.
We've kind of focused on residential real estate here, but especially if you look at places like Pennsylvania, seems like there's a lot of commercial real estate open. Is this a good time maybe to invest in commercial real estate, even if you are a small investor?
once again, opportunity where there is crisis. There are basically four real estate classes, that being industrial, retail, and multifamily, and there's a subset of industrial, such as digital warehouse, which these are warehouses that are subject to manufacturing and also the stocking of goods. So within those 3 to 4 subsets of real estate, the most promising at this point, and they could be at the 4-unit level, duplex or a triplex, to a 200-unit opportunity. But the opportunity to buy is more of a buyer's market on the multifamily, only because the collections, meaning the money that you're collecting from your tenants, happens to be lower on those smaller unit complexes, because those that live in the smaller complexes are more likely to be out of work. If you've got the big institutional 100, 200-unit deals, the collections are pretty high. But if you're going to be at the mom-and-pop level, and that's not an insult at all, it's a good opportunity to go in multifamily, because people do need somewhere to live even during the plague. You're finding good buy opportunities because you're finding those that were holding on to those investments, those multifamily fourplexes, are wanting to leave and cash out at this point, even if they're taking a little bit of a haircut or a discount. And there's lots of lenders out there that will allow you with only 15 to 20% down, or if you go through FHA, for example, you might be able to squeeze in there at 3.5% down, which is a substantial amount of leverage. But if it cash flows, you can move your 401k into investment opportunities or other types of KEO plans.
One more time, where can we go for more information and your new book, and again, available on all the usual platforms?
Absolutely, and Amazon is a great platform because it has all my 3 books and soon to be 4th book, The Flip, which is about single-family residences, The Essayist, where I travel nationally. I actually lived there a little bit in Pittsburgh as well as a mortgage operation guy, and also The Broker, my most recent release about commercial real estate brokers. So you'll see the websites and the links if you go to Amazon and just drop the name D. Sidney Potter in there.
Well, thank you for this information. Again, it's as you say, there's always investment opportunities, no matter what the time or what's going on in the world. And D. Sidney Potter, thank you for joining us today.
Bill, Madden, thanks for your time. Good day.
That's D. Sidney Potter, the author of The Broker, Deals, Steals, and Moving Forward. The preceding has been a recorded presentation of Multiview Media on your local station, 590 AM, 101.1 FM, WMBS.